Greetings, I'm John Balicki, and it is Sunday, December 8th, 2024. I guess we should chat about Intel. So, a lot of news has been coming out about Intel. They, whole bunch of stuff. They, released their new, I don't even know the naming of it, but they're what would have been the 15,000 series using TSMC and partly TSMC and their own foundries in some kind of weird Frankenstein's monster mix kind of bit. I'm not quite sure how to put it. Pat Gelsinger, I can't pronounce it. I don't care. He's out, and I get a lot of great input from Tom at Moore's Law is Dead. And basically, what he said was that Pat could have set every cylinder on fire back like 10 years ago. But because they've been less competitors and competitive, and their foundries have been just lagging behind, that they should be counting pennies, bean counters. Because remember, now corporations like Nvidia and Intel, they're not businesses, they're criminal organizations because they commit egregious numbers of crimes. Okay, so I'm not going to pretend that they're businesses. Okay, um, because a corporation is supposed to be a form of a business, but when you commit crimes, so anyway, we're not going to go into that. Um, so there's a lot of one of the things that who's going to is a business is when we're talking about actual businesses, a business is supposed to make money, and when you have your booms and your busts. And Intel was booming in the 2010s. Okay, Intel doesn't really deserve the success that they've had in the past because they've committed crimes to accomplish that success, and that's we should not be rewarding criminals. Unfortunately, how many people are employed by Intel, and now those people, so Intel needs to become profitable. In order to become profitable, well, they can't be firing on all cylinders, apparently. Now, I don't watch NVIDIA and Intel closely because I'm not interested in giving money to criminals, period. So, but we hear about them in the news, and it's important to have competition because you don't want AMD and Intel to just switch sides. We don't want this. We want this. If we're going to be stuck with two providers in a given industry, we want something closer to a 50-50 than a 90-10. Because then we end up with things like NVIDIA with 12 gigabyte, $800 GPUs and insane pricing and whatnot, and then no one can afford anything, and then we'll all end up 10, 20 years from now as console peasants, right? So, yeah, we don't want that. We want competition. So more players is generally a good thing in every industry. Generally a good thing. Um, so I don't know about the foundries. I think that they really should focus on getting the foundries ironed out. That would probably be because Intel is a chip manufacturing company. Okay. Um, yeah, they make a whole bunch of other stuff, so that way they could take all those chips, put them on the motherboard, and then have an excuse to force you to buy a new motherboard for a new CPU because they're going to make a profit not just of the CPU but also all the chips on the motherboard. Wi-Fi, LAN, um, all the other chips. Just go to the um, driver section in Windows if you've got an Intel system and tell me how many things are labeled Intel. That's a chip. That's something they even if they didn't make a few dozen dollars of profit, there's how many millions of motherboards that are being sold. And you multiply that by a dollar or two or even half a dollar, that adds up. So I think they need to get the foundry business cleaned up. I really think, in my opinion, okay, because I don't know. It's not my place to tell anyone how to run their business or their criminal organization. But I think Intel needs to get the foundry business ironed out. they need to become competitive with TSMC. Um, I think that they would be a good idea to sell some of their fabs off, the ones that are just that they can't upgrade, or less, um, just more difficulty upgrading, and just spin them off, sell them off, because other manufacturers, like, when AMD spun off Global Foundries, are they still stuck at 12 nanometer? So if Intel sent them their 10 or 7 nanometer foundry, even one, right? Um, Now let's say Global Foundries like, well, we'll buy it, but you got to show us how to get to this level of the chips, but we'll pay you for that, right? So it's kind of like a hand-me-down. Like, my father, when I was growing up, he all the computer parts I would get the hand-me-downs, and those parts still had value because I'm 10 years old or whatever. I don't know the difference between a 486 and a Pentium 166. No idea. I just know I'm getting something new and faster, right? Um, so I think there's ways that those are some ideas. I don't know what should actually be done, but we definitely don't want to see TSMC be literally the only manufacturer physically producing the chips. That is not that's all the eggs in one basket is never a good idea. So, you know, um, Intel needs to focus on end results. They need to, what are vanity projects, as Tom at Moore's Law has said. Um, I think Intel Arc, I don't know if it's a vanity project. What I think in that regard is Tom made it clear, like the 3060 using Samsung's 8 nanometer versus Intel's Battle Mage on 5 nanometer, barely being able, 12 gig Intel at TSMC 5, having the same performance as, a 4 or 5 year old 3060 on Samsung 8 nanometer. So there's a lot of IPC, I believe, would be um, about as specific as I could get to verbally articulate. There definitely needs to be a lot of IPC improvements for Intel to become competitive, because if they can't sell the chips for some kind of margin, because you know, yes, $250 12 gig card. If you look at it compared to what's being released, yeah, it could compete, but how many cards are sitting brand new? A 6700 XT, you can still apparently buy 3060 12 gig cards for like under $300. So they've got to compete with that, in the whole NVIDIA, mindset share nonsense. So um, I think releasing a couple cards, and Tom mentioned that it's mainly because if they don't release something, then they're going to get lawsuits and all this other nonsense. Okay, fair, maybe. Um, I would like to see Intel stick around in the GPU market, and I think presuming that Battle Mage is going to launch with much more solid drivers. um, I think if they stick around, and I would like to see them stick around in the GPU market, to just really hyper focus on IPC. This is the simplest way to put it. Um, I don't think, because it's very easy to get optimistic about what we can do a year, 2, 3 from now, but there's always reality, and reality is usually not as favorable as we would like it to be. Okay, fair enough. Um, but when we talk about getting Intel back onto a profitable roadmap, you know, I would say if I was like if I was an all powerful, all knowing deity, if I was like Q from Star Trek, I'd pop down, flash into existence, and say, hey, here's what'll happen. Every atom that is enshrouded in any criminal activity, anti-competitive, anti-consumer, disappears. And once that happens, the foundries become competitive again. And you'll be within striking distance of TSMC. That's what I would do if I was Q from Star Trek. That Q, because there's many Qs. So I think that would be, I would like to see Intel transform away from being a very explicit criminal organization that's not even run competently to a legitimate business that competes on end results. That, like I walked into a store with someone a couple months ago, and that person needed a new laptop. Their laptop just died, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of Mac stuff there. Okay, fine. There's like 1/4 of that. The rest, everything else was laptops. Okay, whatever. And there were two AMD laptops, and they were in the back. That's not clearly anti-competitive and shoving the competition in the back just so people see they see what they see when they walk. That is an example of criminal collaboration. And when you walk into any store and the first thing you see is Intel, whether it's a Staples, a Best Buy, you know, BJ's, wholesale, whatever, and it's always Intel and it's front and center. It should be, if there's three brands, Mac, Intel, and AMD, you should be able to walk up to the aisle and see one of each brand like that. So I asked, the second time I went there, the sales guy comes up to me and I asked him why the AMD laptops were all in the back, and he turned around and walked away. So the whole indoctrinated, brainwashed, team mentality nonsense, like, oh, we're team NVIDIA or we're team Intel. And yes, I don't like the whole team mentality when it comes to AMD, because they're still a corporation. And even though AMD have never screwed over their customers intentionally, but they've definitely fumbled. They've definitely screwed things up. Like the 6500 XT should never have come out with 4 gigs. They have an 8 gig card. They should have just released the 8 gig card. And the 6400 should have at least 6 gigs of VRAM, but they didn't. They screwed up a few things. So the 9000 series, now of course they fixed it with the 9800 X3D, and they're just selling like absolute hotcakes. They can't keep them in stock. So yeah, I think it would be nice to be excited about things. And I think that's why a lot of people in the technology space, other people who are enthusiastic about tech, we're not excited. And it doesn't, you don't have to have, the absolute best performance, but if you can do a lot more with what you're getting for the price, does that not make it more exciting? So I think, an example, Intel with their Ultra series or whatever it's called, having a lot higher number of threads, cutting hyper-threading, reducing the power, and now they're competing on thread count, like AMD was back with Pile Driver and what was the one before that. So when they came out with 8 cores, but they were actually super clusters or whatever, so they weren't really 8 cores, but they were, but whatever. So um, so at least in that regards, they found something to be competitive on, which is good. Um, I don't think it would be good to see Intel stay and remain independent. It would be good to see them shed internal management, and I think I've heard even at AMD that there's problems of management teams being competitive in a negative way against each other. And I mean, when you look at like browser development, and I haven't really heard anything the past like decade or so, but in the 2000s, when Microsoft got back into it, and they were sending each other cakes for the releases of a new browser launch, whatnot, and being positive because we're all colleagues, right? Yes, we can be competitive, but we're also colleagues. We're in the same industry. We're all trying to produce the same end result, to provide better things for people, products, and services. And I think that's a much more desirable attitude. And it definitely should be positive inner workings with every business. Um, so that's, I think, I don't know what else I could say because again, I don't really follow Intel, but I would like to see them remain independent. I'd like to see them, you know, trim the fat on the foundries, get the foundries up and working. Maybe an example, because when they were talking about the 13th and 14th gen and all like they couldn't get enough i9s, and so the problem was that AMD was too competitive, which is a great thing because AMD needs to be too competitive, because 20% market share in a two, provider market is not. We can't have that. And now I don't know if that is the units being sold, like grand total, or if it's just the units that exist in the market and are plus the being sold. Because if it's the units being sold, the consumer market, AMD is like, if you look at Amazon's top seller list, it's like the top 14 CPUs are all AMD, with like one or two exceptions on occasion. So that's telling us that Intel still has a stranglehold on like things like laptops. Obviously, like I mentioned before, when I walked in that store, OEMs, whatnot. There are OEMs that they only sell Intel CPUs and NVIDIA GPUs, and like I look at that because I don't want to give Intel money and I don't want to give NVIDIA money, so I will never buy their products. Um, so just won't. I'm a businessman, so I want better prices, I want better performance, and if I see Intel and Intel's not acting like business, it's acting like a criminal, and I know that they don't want me to be able to upgrade, take out the CPU and put another one. That's not an upgrade. If you have to replace the motherboard, that's a rebuild. It's not an upgrade. It's a rebuild. You're rebuilding the computer. So that would be another thing. I think Intel has definitely had the resources to have socket compatible, and I don't mean this like two or three sockets in one RAM generation. We just saw AMD, you know, with very minimal ROMs on the Ryzen 1000 series, managed to have one socket for the entire DDR4 generation. So I think Intel definitely, if they dropped all the criminal stuff and they actually, you know, and they honest benchmarks, not doing things like when they took ARC and they changed the resolution, so now you don't have an apples to apples resolution comparison with their upscaler to AMD and Nvidia's upscalers. That was not cool. The whole they just need to stop that. What's that Michael Jordan bit? Stop, get help. So, but yeah, and I think that they definitely need, especially if Nvidia has been, Nvidia wants to have their own CPUs, and um, if they're going to enter the market in 2025, 2026, later is better with Nvidia. Nvidia's Nvidia has taken the lessons that Intel didn't learn and then applied that, but they're still criminal. That's the problem there. So, and anyone who disagrees with the criminal things, look up Intel anti-competitive, anti-consumer, and look up NVIDIA anti-competitive, anti-consumer, and you'll find number one on Google, those videos. The Scottish lad, and that they're like an hour a pop, but they're very engaging, very informative, and just absolutely blow anyone away who's just mindlessly Intel or mindlessly NVIDIA. And again, I'm against mindlessly going for an AMD as well. The whole mindless thing is what I'm against. It didn't help that NVIDIA and Intel are criminal organizations. So yeah, if we have businesses competing instead of criminals against competition, that makes the market much better. That means we get better products, better prices, everyone wins. That's what we want. So that's my take on Intel going into 2025, the foundries and whatnot, and you know, what can they do? Can they keep? You know, who should the people who are causing trouble inside of Intel? You know, because eventually they're going to have to cut people out. I would imagine that the people who are creating internal strife should be the ones who get the axe, not the people who are doing the work. Apparently, and this is kind of like a last thing because I was getting kind of to an end point here. Pat Gelsinger, there was a rumor that they were doing rental units for Intel for the CPU cores, and that somehow some of these CPU cores would like merge and create a super core. So you could act like the number of core effective cores would change, so you'd have higher thread counts when you needed them, or more brute force, fewer cores we needed that, like i.e. for gaming, okay, because video games aren't very well threaded. Like some games will do 6 or 8 cores. So there's a very few games that will do more than 8 cores, and that tends to be more like strategy, RTS stuff like that, or turn-based stuff like that. But more of the action stuff is fewer cores, and that sounded interesting. And Pat Gelsinger killed that off. So I don't know, but the challenge is they have to remain in business, and while $10 billion in revenue versus AMD's $5 billion, sounds like they're not doing too bad. The question is where are the expenses? Because they have to maintain all these foundries, and that's a lot of foundries, and they're just sitting there doing nothing, but the lights are on, and you've got to maintain these facilities. So yeah, I think getting rid of the people who are causing strife that aren't producing value, selling off the fabs. But if I was like Global Foundries or some of the other foundries, I would say, hey, you're gonna teach us how to use these fabs and make them, and it's not a guarantee that they'll want to buy them, but we'll see. I think maybe Intel hiring some people from maybe Samsung, because it seems like Samsung's kind of ahead. Maybe there could be a collaboration between Intel and Samsung because they're both having some. Samsung definitely seems to be further along with their foundries, but they're having a lot of issues like the tape out of the nodes when you get that circular disc with all the chips. There's just too many defects on the silicon dies. And so maybe a team up between Intel and Samsung, not one buying the other out, but like a working collaboration partnership, and see what has worked in the past, what they're trying, what's different, and get because if we have 3 foundries that are reasonably competitive with TSMC in say 2 or 3 years from now or something like that, that would be fantastic for the market because again we want better prices, we want more competition. And if Intel is able to, even quietly get the IPC on Intel Arc and beef it up so it can be competitive in the future and just keep it on life support and just show that it will get there. And it has. I mean, it's made huge strides if you look at where the drivers were when they launched because they had to launch. Versus where they are now, and I'm sure they learn their lesson in battle mage drivers when they launch. Well, I mean, they technically launched. It's a paper launch one I've heard. I'm sure they'll be at least respectable considering the past. So I don't know. That's my thoughts. Hopefully, most people, the people were, who are contributing to Intel and keeping it competitive, or at least as much as can be, because you never really want to see people lose their jobs. You don't want to see people get hired off of like frivolous projects when the money's not there. Um, you know, because how many people really want to go job hunting from one job to another every 2, 3, 4 years, something like that? You know, it's not viable for a lot of people, especially if you had to move to a whole other state, and you had to uplift your family and all this other stuff. So a lot of considerations when these big CEOs make these decisions, and they're not focused on how that's going to affect the people in their business, or if NVIDIA and Intel, that would be criminal organizations. But hopefully, they will become much more substantially less criminal. Um, but we'll see. Because I would love to be able to say, hey, 5, 10 years from now, Intel, they're competitive. All the anti-consumer, you know, competitive criminal, I'd love to see all the criminals just disappear and just see them be a business and just produce those end results and keep, when AMD gets that market share, counterbalance them, and everyone's happy. And then we have hardware news articles and videos about talking about the exciting things. And no, you don't have to do a rebuild or an upgrade. It's a rebuild. Yeah, you can get something great and whatnot, and you're not gonna be screwed because you got this chip and now you can't upgrade to the new one and whatnot. So yeah, there's a lot of positive things that could happen if the right people make the right decisions, of course. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this video. And when I get some more free time, and I'm hoping for that, I don't know about December, but hopefully in January, whatnot, things will clear up. There's just a lot of business stuff I'd like to chat about. Not inherently with tech, but I'd like to keep doing some more tech videos here. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys around.